Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the massive crystal chamber, feeling smaller than she ever had in her life. The dome stretched hundreds of feet above her head, catching the light of 3 distant suns and scattering it into rainbow patterns across the polished floor. This was the high chamber of the Galactic Council, the place where the fate of entire civilizations was decided. Right now, they were deciding humanity's fate, and Elena didn't like what she was hearing. 12 massive thrones ringed the chamber, each one holding a representative of the elder species. These were the races that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, long before humans even discovered fire. They looked down at Elena with expressions that ranged from mild interest to barely concealed contempt. She had been standing here for 3 hours, listening to them debate her people as if humans were children who needed to be taught a lesson. Counselor Thexnor leaned forward in his throne. He was a Velkari, a species that resembled giant mantises with 4 arms and compound eyes that glittered like black diamonds. His voice came through the translator with a tone of absolute authority. The matter is settled. Humanity will surrender control of the Terran Defense Fleet within 30 standard days. All human colonies will submit to protective oversight by Council peacekeepers. This is not negotiable. Elena felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice level. She had been trained for this. Diplomacy was about staying calm even when every instinct screamed at you to fight back. Counselor, with respect, the incident at the border was minor. One of our patrol ships responded to a distress call in what we believed was neutral space. The Krell fired first. Our vessel returned fire in self-defense and then retreated. No Krell ships were destroyed. No one died. This hardly justifies dismantling our entire military. Another counselor, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Sorvesh, pulsed with bioluminescent colors that the translator rendered as condescending amusement. That is precisely the problem, Ambassador. Your species responds to every situation with violence. You are too emotional, too quick to anger. It is in your nature. We have studied your history. Your entire planet's story is one of constant warfare. You even fight among yourselves. We've been at peace internally for over a century, Elena protested. Yes, our past was violent, but we've grown. We've changed. We've followed every council law, paid every tariff, accepted every restriction you've placed on our technology and trade. We've done everything you asked. Thexnor's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. You've done what you were told because you had no choice. But we see what lies beneath your civilized surface. You are predators playing at being diplomats. The Krell incident proves that given any excuse, humans will resort to violence. For the safety of the galaxy, you must be controlled. The word controlled hit Elena like a physical blow. She looked around at the other counselors, searching for any sign of support. A few looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. This decision had already been made before she even entered the chamber. This whole hearing was just theater, a way for the council to pretend they were being fair. And if we refuse? Elena asked quietly. The chamber went silent. Several counselors shifted in their seats. Apparently, no one had expected humanity to actually consider defying them. Thexnor's eyes glittered with something that might have been satisfaction. Then the council will have no choice but to implement economic sanctions. All trade with human worlds will cease. Your colonies will be isolated. And if necessary, we will enforce compliance through military action. But it won't come to that, will it, Ambassador? Humanity is many things, but you're not stupid. You know you cannot stand against the entire galaxy. Elena stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of billions of human lives pressing down on her shoulders. She thought about Earth, about the colonies scattered across 47 star systems, about the families and children who depended on trade with other species for medicine, food, technology. She thought about the Terran Defense Fleet. The pride of humanity, reduced to museum pieces or worse, handed over to these arrogant creatures who had never respected humans from the day they made first contact. I will convey your decision to my government, she said finally, her voice carefully neutral, but I want it on record that humanity considers this unjust. We have committed no crime. We have broken no law. You are punishing us for what we might do, not for what we have done. Your objection is noted, Thexnor said dismissively. 30 days, Ambassador. We expect full compliance. Elena turned and walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. She kept her back straight and her head high, refusing to show any weakness in front of them. But inside, she was shaking with a mixture of fear and rage that she hadn't felt in years. The journey back to Earth took 3 days, even with the fastest Council-approved FTL drive. Elena spent most of that time in her quarters, preparing her report and trying to figure out what humanity could possibly do. The options all looked bad. Comply and lose their independence, becoming permanent second-class citizens in a galaxy that already treated them with contempt. Refuse and face economic collapse followed by military invasion. There had to be another way, but she couldn't see it. When her ship finally entered Earth orbit, Elena felt a surge of emotion at seeing the blue-green planet below. Humanity had come so far. They had reached for the stars, discovered they weren't alone, and tried so hard to fit into galactic civilization. And for what? To be treated like dangerous animals that needed to be caged? The United Terran government convened an emergency session within hours of her arrival. Elena stood before the assembled leaders of Earth and presented the Council's ultimatum. The reaction was explosive. Some ministers immediately advocated for compliance, arguing that humanity couldn't possibly win a war against species that had mastered space travel while humans were still living in caves. Others demanded defiance, saying that a life of servitude was worse than death. Admiral Marcus Chen sat quietly through most of the debate. He was a lean man in his 60s with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He commanded the Terran Defense Fleet, all 847 ships that humanity had built over the past 47 years. When he finally spoke, the room fell silent. "We always knew this might happen," Chen said calmly. "The Council has never seen us as equals. They've tolerated us because we were useful and because we didn't cause problems. But the moment we showed any spine, any hint that we wouldn't just roll over, they decided to put us in our place. The question isn't whether we should comply. The question is whether we're willing to fight for our freedom." "Fight with what?" demanded one minister. "They have thousands of ships, weapons we can't match, technology centuries ahead of ours." Chen smiled, and there was something cold in that smile that made Elena's breath catch. "That's what they think. That's what we've let them think. But we've been preparing for this day since we first realized the Council would never treat us as equals. It's time to activate Protocol Prometheus." Several ministers looked confused, but Elena saw recognition dawn on the faces of a few others. Protocol Prometheus. She'd heard whispers about it, rumors of secret defense projects and hidden weapons research. She'd always assumed they were just stories, the kind of conspiracy theories that every government attracted. But looking at Chen's face now, she realized it was real. "What's Protocol Prometheus?" she asked. Chen turned to her and his expression was grim. "It's humanity's insurance policy. And if we use it, the galaxy is going to learn that we're not the helpless children they think we are. But Ambassador, you need to understand something. If we go down this road, there's no going back. We'll either win our freedom or lose everything. There's no middle ground." Elena thought about the Council, about Thexnor's contemptuous tone, about 47 years of swallowing pride and accepting insults. She thought about humanity's children growing up in a galaxy where they would always be treated as inferior, where their potential would always be limited by the fear and prejudice of older species. "Then we don't go back," she said firmly. "We go forward. We show them what happens when you mistake patience for weakness." The vote was taken. It wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity would not comply. Messages went out to all the colonies, encrypted communications that would prepare them for what was coming. The Terran Defense Fleet began moving into position. Scientists in hidden facilities activated projects that had been dormant for years. And on the 30th day, when Counselor Thexnor contacted Earth expecting humanity's surrender, he instead received a simple 2-word message from Admiral Chen: "Come and take it." 15 days had passed since humanity delivered its defiant message to the Galactic Council. 15 days of tense waiting, of preparing for the storm that everyone knew was coming. Admiral Chen spent most of those days on the bridge of the TDFS Indomitable, humanity's largest warship, watching his tactical displays and refining his plans. He knew the Council would respond. He just didn't know how brutal they would be. The answer came at 0347 hours on the 16th day. The colony of New Brisbane, a thriving world of 340,000 souls in the Perseus Arm, lit up Chen's display with emergency alerts. He watched in horror as the tactical feed showed dozens of Krell warships dropping out of FTL directly above the colony. The Krell were one of the Council's attack dogs, a species that loved warfare and had been itching for an excuse to hit humanity for years. The orbital bombardment began immediately. Chen watched helplessly as kinetic strikes and plasma weapons carved into New Brisbane's surface. The colony's shields held for 17 minutes before collapsing. After that, it was slaughter. The human defense platforms fought back desperately, managing to destroy 3 Krell ships before they were overwhelmed. By the time the Terran Defense Fleet's Rapid Response Group arrived 2 hours later, New Brisbane was a smoking ruin, 340,000 people. Gone. Just like that. Chen stood on his bridge, staring at the casualty reports and felt something break inside him, not his resolve. That only hardened. What broke was the last small hope he'd been holding that maybe somehow this could all be resolved without massive bloodshed. The Krell had made sure that was impossible now. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "the Council is broadcasting a statement." Chen pulled up the feed. Counselor Thexnor appeared on the screen, looking grave and concerned in a way that made Chen want to put his fist through something. The Velkhari's translated words dripped with false sympathy. The Galactic Council deeply regrets the tragic incident at New Brisbane. However, this unfortunate event demonstrates exactly why humanity's military forces must be brought under Council supervision. The human military presence in that sector provoked the Krell Empire, leading to this regrettable loss of life. Had humanity complied with our directive and removed their forces, these colonists would still be alive. We renew our call for immediate human disarmament. Furthermore, given humanity's continued defiance, we are reducing the compliance deadline to 72 hours. After that time, the Council will take necessary action to ensure galactic security. The transmission ended. Chen stared at the blank screen for a long moment, then turned to his executive officer. "Did that sound to you like they just blamed us for the Krell murdering our colonists?" "Yes, sir." "That's exactly what it sounded like," Chen nodded slowly. He pulled up his secure channel to Earth and found that Ambassador Vasquez was already calling him. Her face on the screen was pale with rage. "Tell me you saw that," she said without preamble. "I saw it." "Elena, what's happening at the Council?" "I've been locked out of all official meetings, but I have sources." "Admiral, I've found evidence. 3 Council species, including the Velkhari, provided the Krell with detailed intelligence on New Brisbane's defenses. The orbital positions, shield frequencies, response times, everything. This wasn't an impulsive attack. It was planned, and the Council helped." Chen felt ice water in his veins. "They set us up. They wanted a massacre to justify stronger action against us. Worse, Counselor Thexnor met privately with the Krell ambassador 2 hours before the attack. I have recordings. He told them there would be no consequences, that the Council would cover for them. Marcus, they didn't just allow this to happen. They encouraged it." For a long moment, Chen couldn't speak. He'd known the Council was arrogant and prejudiced, but he'd still thought of them as civilized. This was something else entirely. This was evil. "I'm taking this to the full Council," Elena continued. "I'm going to expose what they did, demand justice for New Brisbane, and insist on protection for our remaining colonies." "Elena, they're not going to listen. I have to try." She did try. Chen watched the broadcast from the Council chamber as Elena presented her evidence, showed the recordings, demanded accountability. The response was worse than indifference. It was dismissal. The Council barely looked at her evidence before Thexnor declared it irrelevant. "Even if these allegations were true," the Velkhari said, his tone making clear he didn't care whether they were or not, "they changed nothing. Humanity remains a threat. You have 72 hours to comply. If you do not, a peacekeeping coalition will enforce the Council's directive. That is final." Elena stood in that crystal chamber, alone before 12 species who had already decided humanity's fate, and Chen saw something change in her face. The diplomat disappeared, replaced by something harder and angrier. "Then hear me clearly," she said, her voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. "Humanity will not comply. We will not surrender our right to defend ourselves to a council that conspires with murderers. You want our fleet? Come and take it. But know this. We are done pretending you are our betters. We are done accepting your contempt. You've just shown us exactly what you are. Cowards who hide behind pretty words while innocent people die." She turned and walked out before they could respond, leaving the council in shocked silence. No one had ever spoken to them like that. No one had ever dared. Back on Earth, the United Terran government held another emergency session. This time there was no debate. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would not surrender. Every colony received orders to begin immediate evacuation of non-combatants to hardened shelters. Defensive positions were fortified. Reserve forces were activated, and Admiral Chen received authorization to implement the final phase of Protocol Prometheus. Chen stood before his senior officers and laid out what was coming. The Council is sending a coalition fleet to force our compliance. Intelligence suggests 6 species are contributing ships. We're looking at somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 vessels. They'll come to Sol first to cut the head off the snake. They expect us to fold when we see those numbers. Will we? Asked Captain Sarah Rodriguez of the TDFS Defiant. Chen smiled grimly. No, because they don't know what we've been building. They think we've been following their technology restrictions. They think our ships are second-rate copies of their designs. They're wrong on both counts. For 30 years we've been developing weapon systems in secret. We've been reverse engineering their technology and improving on it. And we've been preparing for exactly this scenario. He pulled up schematics that made several officers gasp. New weapons, new defenses, new tactics that would horrify the so-called civilized species of the galaxy. We're going to show them what human warfare looks like, Chen said quietly. Real warfare, not the ritualized battles they're used to, where everyone follows rules and tries to minimize casualties. They want to see what happens when you push humanity too far? We'll show them. But I need you all to understand something. Once we start this, people are going to die. A lot of people. Not just theirs, ours too. Some of you won't survive what's coming. So I'm giving everyone here a choice. You can transfer to non-combat roles. No questions asked. No judgment. But if you stay, you're committing to see this through to the end. No one moved. No one asked for a transfer. These were volunteers, every one of them. And they'd all lost friends or family at New Brisbane. They knew what they were fighting for. Good, Chen said. Then let's get to work. We've got 72 hours to finish our preparations. After that, we're going to teach the galaxy a lesson they'll never forget. Those 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Ships moved into position. Weapons were loaded. Crews drilled until they could execute combat maneuvers in their sleep. And on civilian channels across human space, people watched and waited, terrified and defiant in equal measure. Dr. Sarah Kim worked around the clock in her hidden laboratory beneath the lunar surface. She was the architect of humanity's secret weapons program, and now all her theoretical work was about to become very real. Her teams activated systems that had never been tested in actual combat. Quantum-entangled munitions that could ignore enemy shields. Relativistic kinetic kill vehicles that struck with the force of small nuclear weapons. AI-assisted combat swarms that could adapt to enemy tactics in real time. And the crown jewel of her work, adaptive shields that could reconfigure themselves to counter whatever weapons hit them. Will it work? Her assistant asked nervously. Sarah looked at the readouts, at the weapons that violated 6 Council technology restrictions, and shrugged. We're about to find out. But even if only half of this works, we're going to surprise them. They think we're primitives playing with fire. They're about to learn that humans are very, very good at making things that kill. On the 70th hour, long-range sensors detected the coalition fleet dropping out of FTL at the edge of the Sol system. 2,400 ships, exactly as intelligence had predicted. They came from 6 species, all of them eager to put humanity in its place. They formed up in a massive crescent formation, a show of overwhelming force meant to terrify Earth into immediate surrender. What they found waiting for them made their commanders pause in confusion. The entire Terran defense fleet was there, all 8 Hun. The first volley from the Terran defense fleet caught the coalition completely off guard. Vormesh had expected warning shots, demands for negotiation, perhaps some token resistance before the inevitable surrender. Instead, his forward screen of ships simply ceased to exist. 47 vessels gone in less than 3 seconds, torn apart by weapons that shouldn't have existed. Admiral Chen watched his tactical display with cold satisfaction as the relativistic kinetic kill vehicles struck home. They were simple weapons in concept, just tungsten rods accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. But the results were anything but simple. When something moving that fast hit a shield, the shield didn't just fail, it catastrophically overloaded, taking the ship's power grid with it. The follow-up conventional missiles had no trouble finding their targets. First blood to us, his tactical officer reported. Enemy formation disrupting. They're confused. They had reason to be. The Coalition had brought enough firepower to level a planet, and they'd just lost nearly 50 ships before they even knew the fight had started. Formesh's voice came over the communication channel, no longer amused. "Chen, you'll pay for that. All ships advance and engage. Show these primitives how real warriors fight." The Coalition fleet surged forward and the real battle began. Chen had spent 3 days positioning his ships precisely, and now that positioning paid off. The human vessels didn't meet the enemy head-on. Instead, they flowed around the advancing Coalition like water, using their superior speed to strike from unexpected angles. This was humanity's first advantage, one the Council didn't know about. Dr. Kim's team had cracked the fundamental limitations of Council FTL technology and improved it. Human ships were 30% faster in real space and could jump in and out of FTL with half the cooldown time. The Coalition fought like they were underwater while humanity danced around them. The second advantage became clear when the Coalition's weapons started hitting human shields. The shields held and kept holding even against weapons that should have punched right through them. Kim's adaptive shield technology analyzed each incoming attack and reconfigured itself to counter it. Plasma weapons that should have melted hulls dissipated harmlessly. Kinetic strikes that should have crushed ships slid off like rainwater. Formesh watched in growing horror as his overwhelming numerical advantage meant nothing. His ships couldn't catch the human vessels, and when they did manage to land hits, they barely scratched the paint. Meanwhile, human weapons tore through Coalition shields like they weren't even there. "What is this?" he demanded. "Their technology shouldn't be this advanced. They've only been spacefaring for a few hundred years." What Vormesh didn't understand was that humanity had spent those years learning from everyone they met, taking ideas from a dozen different species and combining them in ways no one else had thought to try. The Council species had become complacent, relying on technology that hadn't fundamentally changed in centuries. Humanity had been innovating desperately, knowing that one day they might have to fight for their survival. The battle raged for 4 hours before the Coalition tried to adapt. They abandoned their formal formations and tried to swarm individual human ships with superior numbers. It was a reasonable tactic. It should have worked. It didn't. That's when humanity unveiled the combat swarms. Thousands of small AI-controlled drones poured out of specially modified freighters that had looked like they'd be easy targets. Each drone was barely 3 meters across, too small to be effectively targeted by weapons designed to fight full-sized warships. But each one carried enough explosive power to cripple a destroyer, and they moved with inhuman precision, coordinating their attacks through quantum-entangled communication that couldn't be jammed. The drones tore into the Coalition fleet like a school of piranha. They targeted engines, weapon systems, and life support, crippling ships without necessarily destroying them. The goal wasn't just to win, it was to make the victory so devastating that no one would ever threaten humanity again. Captain Rodriguez commanded one of the human carrier groups, and she watched with grim pride as her drones overwhelmed a Velkari heavy cruiser. The enemy ship's point defense tried desperately to stop them, but there were simply too many targets. Within minutes, the cruiser was dead in space, its crew scrambling for escape pods. "Target their rescue operations?" her weapons officer asked. "Negative," Rodriguez said firmly. "We're not monsters. Let them evacuate, but make sure they watch as we take their ships apart." That was humanity's third advantage, one that might have seemed like a disadvantage to the Coalition species. Humans had rules about warfare that they actually followed, even when fighting for their lives. They didn't target escape pods or medical ships. They didn't use biological or chemical weapons. They didn't torture prisoners or execute captives. But within those moral boundaries, they fought with a ferocity that terrified their enemies. The Coalition had expected primitives who didn't know how to properly conduct war. What they got was a species that had perfected warfare through thousands of years of practice, who understood that victory came not just from destroying enemies but from breaking their will to fight. 8 hours into the battle, a Krell battle group tried to break through the human lines and target Earth directly. They thought if they could threaten the homeworld, humanity would have to pull back. It was a fatal miscalculation. Admiral Chen was waiting for exactly this move. The moment the Krell ships committed to their attack run, he triggered the trap. A dozen human destroyers that had been playing damaged, limping away from the main battle, suddenly revealed they were perfectly functional. They activated their FTL drives and jumped to point-blank range of the Krell battle group. What happened next would give Krell nightmares for generations. The human ships opened fire with nuclear-pumped X-ray lasers, weapons that the civilized species had banned as too destructive. At that range, against surprise targets, the effect was apocalyptic. 17 Krell warships simply vaporized, their fusion reactors breaching in a chain reaction that took out 3 more ships from friendly fire. "This is for New Brisbane," Chen said quietly, watching the Krell survivors flee in panic. 12 hours into the battle, Vormesh finally accepted what his sensors were telling him. He was losing. Badly. He'd started with 2,400 ships. He now had less than 800 combat-effective vessels. The humans had lost ships too, but nowhere near as many. The battle wasn't close. It was a massacre. He sent a communication to the council, his voice shaking. "They were ready for us. They've been preparing for this for years. Their technology is beyond ours. Their tactics are brutal and effective. We can't win this engagement. Request immediate reinforcements and authorization to withdraw." The response from Councillor Thexnor was cold. "You have your orders. Humanity must be brought to heel. Failure is not acceptable. Fight until you achieve victory or die trying." Vormesh stared at that message for a long moment, then did something that shocked everyone monitoring the channel. He muttered a curse in his native language and broadcast an open message to the entire fleet. "All coalition ships, this is Commander Vormesh. I'm ordering a general retreat. We were lied to about human capabilities. This isn't a peacekeeping mission, it's a suicide run. Anyone who wants to stay and die for the Council's pride is welcome to do so. The rest of you follow me out of this system now." The coalition fleet broke. Some ships, mostly Krell and Velkari vessels whose commanders feared the Council more than they feared humanity, tried to continue fighting. The rest ran, jumping to FTL as fast as their drives could charge. The human fleet let them go, focusing their fire on the ships that remained. The Battle of Sol ended after 16 hours of continuous combat. The final tally was devastating. The coalition had arrived with 2,400 ships. They left with 727. Over 1,600 vessels were destroyed or captured. Human losses were significant but nowhere near as catastrophic. 512 ships destroyed, another 200 damaged but salvageable. Admiral Chen stood on his bridge, looking at the graveyard of ships floating in the space around Earth. He felt no joy in victory, only a bone-deep weariness. He'd just presided over the largest space battle in galactic history, and the death toll on both sides was in the hundreds of thousands. He knew every single human casualty's name would eventually cross his desk, and he'd carry that weight for the rest of his life. But he also knew what had to happen next. The galaxy needed to understand that this wasn't a fluke, wasn't luck, wasn't some trick that would work only once. Humanity had to make it clear that they could and would defend themselves against any threat. "Communications," he said quietly. "Patch me through to every major broadcast network in the galaxy. Council-controlled and independent? I don't care who owns them. I want everyone to hear this." When the channels were ready, Chen authorized the release of full combat footage from the battle. Every species with FTL communication received the same package. 16 hours of humanity systematically dismantling the coalition fleet, edited down to a 2-hour highlight that showed Ever. The galaxy was burning and Councillor Thexnor had lit the match. 3 days after humanity's victory at Sol, the Velkari called for an emergency council session. The chamber was tense with half the councillors present via hologram, rather than in person. A breach of protocol that showed just how fractured things had become. "The matter is simple," Thexnor declared, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "Humanity has revealed itself as a threat to galactic peace. They possess weapons that violate every technology restriction we've imposed. They have attacked Council forces unprovoked. They must be destroyed completely and utterly before their infection spreads." Unprovoked? Councillor Marseth of the Torvin Collective leaned forward, her scales rippling with anger. "You authorized the Krell attack on New Brisbane. I've seen the evidence. You provided them with intelligence. You told them there would be no consequences. And now you call humanity's self-defense unprovoked? Lies spread by human propaganda," Thexnor hissed. "We were investigating those claims when humanity attacked our peacekeeping fleet." "Peacekeeping fleet?" Another councillor, a crystalline being named Shard, made a sound like breaking glass that translated as bitter laughter. 2,400 warships is not a peacekeeping force. It's an invasion fleet. We sent them to Sol to conquer, and they defended themselves. That is not a crime." The chamber erupted into argument. For the first time in the Council's 1,000-year history, members were openly accusing each other of conspiracy and war crimes. The unity that had ruled the galaxy for so long was shattering, and everyone could feel it. Thexnor slammed his claws on his throne. "Enough, I'm calling for a vote. All species who stand with the Council against the human threat, commit your fleets now. Those who refuse will be considered in violation of their Council oaths." The vote was called. 4 species pledged their support to Thexnor. 6 abstained. 2. The Torvans and the Crystalline Collective openly refused and withdrew from the chamber. The Council had split. Admiral Chen watched the recording of the session from his command center on Luna. Ambassador Vasquez stood next to him, her arms crossed. "They're going to come at us with everything they have left," she said quietly. "Thexnor can't back down now. His credibility depends on destroying us." "I know," Chen replied, "which is why we're not going to wait for them to organize another fleet. We're going to take the fight to them. If they want war, we'll give them war, but we'll do it on our terms." He pulled up a star map showing 23 systems, all of them Council military strongholds. "Operation Retribution begins in 6 hours. We hit them everywhere at once, fast and hard. We destroy their military capability before they can use it against our colonies. And we show the galaxy that humanity doesn't just fight defensively. We can strike back." The operation launched with precision that would have impressed any military strategist in the galaxy. Human strike forces, operating independently with quantum-entangled communication for coordination, hit military targets across 23 systems simultaneously. They didn't target civilian populations or infrastructure. Every shot was aimed at warships, orbital defense platforms, weapons factories, and military command centers. The Krell homeworld's orbital defense network was humanity's first target. The Krell had slaughtered New Brisbane, and Chen wanted them to understand the consequences. A battle group of 40 human ships dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system and began their attack run. The Krell had been preparing for this with hundreds of defense platforms and 36 warships in position. It didn't matter. The human ships came in fast, using their superior FTL capabilities to jump in close, fire, and jump out before the Krell could coordinate their defense. It was a tactic the Council species couldn't counter, because they'd never seen anyone use FTL so aggressively. Their ships needed minutes to recharge between jumps. Human ships needed seconds. In 40 minutes, the Krell orbital defense network was scrap metal floating in space. The human fleet broadcast a message to the planet below, showing footage of New Brisbane's destruction next to footage of their shattered defenses. "This is what you did to innocents," the message said. "This is what happens when you murder human civilians. We have not targeted your cities. We have not killed your children. But we have taken away your ability to project power beyond your world. If you attack any human colony again, we will come back and finish the job. Remember this day." The human fleet jumped away, leaving the Krell military leadership in chaos and the civilian population terrified. Across the galaxy, similar strikes were playing out. The Velkari lost 3 major shipyards in an hour. The Quillari saw their forward operating bases reduced to ruins. The Sorgathi watched as their missile platforms, which had taken decades to build, were systematically destroyed. And everywhere, humanity made the same point. They targeted military assets only. They gave civilians time to evacuate. They followed their own rules of war even while demonstrating overwhelming force. It was a calculated message: we can destroy you, but we choose to be merciful. Don't mistake mercy for weakness. Dr. Kim watched the operation unfold from her lab, monitoring the performance of her weapon systems in real combat. Everything was working better than expected. The quantum-entangled munitions, the improved FTL drives, the adaptive shields, all of it was giving humanity an edge that the Council couldn't match. But she also saw the casualty reports coming in. Human ships were being destroyed. Crews were dying. Every victory had a cost. And that cost was paid in the lives of young people who'd signed up to defend humanity but probably never imagined they'd be fighting the entire galaxy. "Are we winning?" her assistant asked. Kim looked at the tactical displays, at the red markers showing destroyed enemy facilities and the blue markers showing human losses. "We're achieving our objectives. Whether we're winning? That depends on what happens next. We can destroy their military capability, but we can't hold territory. We're raiders, not conquerors." Eventually, they'll rebuild unless something changes. That change came from an unexpected source. While humanity was conducting military operations, Ambassador Vasquez was conducting her own campaign. She'd spent the past week leaking classified information to independent journalists across the galaxy, documents showing the Council's conspiracy with the Krell, financial records proving corruption and preferential treatment, communication logs revealing just how much contempt the Council had for younger species. The information bomb exploded across galactic media. Suddenly, populations that had been told humanity was a rogue threat were seeing evidence that the Council had provoked the conflict deliberately. Protests that had started small grew into massive demonstrations. On 14 worlds, governments faced votes of no confidence. The Council's carefully maintained image of wise, benevolent leadership was crumbling. And then the smoking gun emerged. A junior Velkari diplomat, disgusted by what his government had done, leaked a recording of Thexanor speaking privately with other Council members before the New Brisbane attack. His words were damning. Let the Krell kill a few 100,000 humans. It will justify stronger action, and the younger species will see what happens when anyone challenges Council authority. Humanity must be made an example of, something so broken and traumatized that no one else will ever think to defy us. The recording went viral. Within hours, 3 more Council species withdrew their support for the war. 2 announced they would open diplomatic relations with humanity. The Council's unity was completely shattered, and Thexanor found himself isolated with only the most hardline species still supporting him. But isolation made him desperate rather than cautious. He gathered what forces he could, calling in every favor, making promises he had no authority to keep. Within 2 weeks, he'd assembled a fleet of 5,000 warships, the largest military force ever gathered in galactic history. He was going to crush humanity once and for all, or die trying. Admiral Chen received intelligence reports on the fleet's assembly and felt a cold dread. 5,000 ships. Even with humanity's technological advantages, those were impossible odds. His entire fleet was down to around 600 combat-effective vessels after the raids. He could maybe hold Sol against that kind of assault, but it would be close and the casualties would be horrific. They're coming for Earth, he told his senior staff. Thexanor is betting everything on one final strike. He thinks if he can destroy Earth, humanity will collapse. Will we? Asked Captain Rodriguez. Chen shook his head. No. Earth is our homeworld, but we're more than one planet now. We're 47 colonies across as many systems. Even if Earth fell, humanity would survive. But we'd lose billions of people, and the psychological damage would be immense. We can't let it happen, so what do we do? Rodriguez asked. We can't fight 5,000 ships, Chen smiled grimly. We don't fight them. We trap them. Dr. Kim, tell them about Project Labyrinth. Kim pulled up schematics that made everyone in the room go pale. For the past 2 years, we've been seeding the approaches to Sol with quantum tunnel generators. They're basically FTL mines that create artificial wormholes. We can use them to redirect enemy ships that enter specific coordinates, sending them anywhere we want. We've never tested it on this scale, but theoretically we could scatter an entire fleet across 100 different systems. The Armada came out of FTL like an avalanche of stars, 5,000 warships, the collected might of 6 species loyal to Counselor Thexanor's desperate gamble, dropped into the Sol system in a formation so massive it showed up on astronomical sensors from 3 systems away. On Earth, billions of people looked up at the night sky and saw the enemy fleet as bright pinpricks of light, close enough to be visible to the naked eye. It was the most terrifying sight in human history. Aboard the TDFS Indomitable, Admiral Chen watched his displays with a calm he didn't entirely feel. Everything depended on the next few hours. Project Labyrinth was untested on this scale. Dr. Kim's quantum tunnel generators might work perfectly, or they might tear holes in space-time that killed everyone in the system. There was no way to know until they tried. All ships report ready, his executive officer said. Defensive positions established. Civilians are in hardened shelters. We're as prepared as we'll ever be. Chen nodded and opened a channel to the entire Terran defense fleet. 600 ships against 5,000. Impossible odds by any conventional calculation. But humanity had stopped fighting conventional wars the moment the Council decided to destroy them. This is Admiral Chen to all vessels. What we do in the next few hours will echo through galactic history for centuries. Our children and our children's children will remember this day. They'll remember that when the entire galaxy tried to crush us, when overwhelming force came to destroy our homeworld, we stood our ground. Not because we weren't afraid, not because we thought we couldn't lose, but because we are human and humans don't surrender. We don't give up. We fight for what's ours with everything we have, and if we fall, we make damn sure to take our enemies with us. He paused, looking at the tactical display showing thousands of enemy ships. But we're not going to fall. Because we're smarter, faster, and angrier than they are. Because we've got weapons they don't know about and tactics they can't predict. Because we're defending our home, and there's nothing in this universe more dangerous than a human. Protecting what they love. So let's show Counselor Thexanor what a mistake he made. Let's show the galaxy what happens when you push humanity too far. All ships, weapons free. Execute Operation Labyrinth. The enemy fleet advanced in perfect formation, confident in their overwhelming numbers. Thexanor broadcast from his flagship, his voice full of righteous fury. Humanity, this is your last chance. Surrender now and we will be merciful. Continue to resist and we will reduce Earth to ash. You cannot win this fight. You know this. Accept the inevitable and spare your species from extinction. Chen's response was to activate the quantum tunnel generators. Space around the advancing fleet suddenly twisted. Reality bent in ways it wasn't meant to bend. The enemy ships found themselves caught in gravitational eddies that pulled them in different directions. Ships that had been next to each other suddenly found themselves thousands of kilometers apart. Fleet cohesion so carefully maintained shattered in seconds, and then the wormholes opened. Dozens of them, appearing like tears in the fabric of space itself. They weren't large, barely big enough for a single ship, but they were precisely positioned. Enemy vessels found themselves drawn into the tunnels, unable to resist the gravitational pull. One moment they were in Sol system, preparing to attack Earth. The next moment they were somewhere else entirely. Dr. Kim watched from her lunar command center as her life's work either succeeded brilliantly or failed catastrophically. The quantum calculations were being performed by the most powerful computers humanity had ever built, constantly adjusting the tunnels to capture as many enemy ships as possible. The math was insanely complex, and even a small error could cause a tunnel to collapse, potentially taking half the system with it. It's working, her assistant breathed. The tunnels are stable. We're redirecting their entire fleet. Don't celebrate yet, Kim said tensely. We need to maintain this for at least 20 minutes to scatter them enough that they can't regroup. In the chaos, the Terran defense fleet struck. While enemy ships were being pulled through wormholes or trying desperately to escape the gravitational anomalies, human vessels darted in and out, targeting the ships that remained. It was like shooting fish in a barrel, except the fish were city-sized warships and the barrel was the Sol system. Captain Rodriguez led a strike group that focused on the Velkari heavy cruisers. These were the backbone of the enemy fleet, and without them, coordination would be impossible. Her ships moved with practiced efficiency, jumping in close, launching their weapons, and jumping out before the enemy could return fire. In 15 minutes, her group disabled or destroyed 27 capital ships. Aboard his flagship, Thexanor watched in growing horror as his carefully assembled armada disintegrated. Ships were vanishing through impossible portals. Others were being picked off by human hit-and-run attacks. His formation was gone, his numerical advantage meaningless. The humans had done something that shouldn't be possible. They'd weaponized space-time itself. All ships retreat, he ordered frantically. Get out of the system! Jump to FTL immediately. But jumping to FTL required calculations, required time for drives to charge. And in that time, more ships were lost to the wormholes or to human weapons. The retreat became a rout, with ships fleeing in all directions, abandoning any attempt at organization or mutual support. When the quantum tunnels finally collapsed after 23 minutes of operation, only 800 of the original 5,000 enemy ships remained in Sol system. The rest had been scattered across 96 different star systems, broken into small groups that would take weeks to reunite, if they could reunite at all. Those 800 ships tried to run, but they were surrounded by a defensive network that had been 30 years in the making. What looked like ordinary asteroids revealed themselves to be weapons platforms. Mining stations activated military-grade sensors and targeting systems. Even the supposedly civilian orbital habitats opened concealed weapons ports. This is what you missed, Chen said, broadcasting to the enemy fleet. While you were comfortable in your council chambers, we were fortifying every rock in our system. You came to Sol thinking it was just Earth and a few ships. You came to destroy our homeworld, but you forgot something important. Sol isn't just where humanity was born. It's where we've been preparing for this exact scenario since the day we realized you'd never accept us as equals. The defense platforms opened fire, and the space around Earth lit up like a fireworks display. The remaining enemy ships fought back desperately, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely demoralized. The battle lasted 3 more hours, and by the end of it, the invading fleet had been completely destroyed. The casualty count was staggering. Of the 5,000 ships Thexnor had brought to Sol, fewer than 200 escaped. The rest were destroyed, captured, or scattered across the galaxy. Human losses were significant, but not catastrophic. 40% of the Terran defense fleet was gone. Hundreds of defense platforms destroyed and 3 orbital habitats damaged. But Earth had survived. Humanity had survived. In the aftermath, human fast attack ships hunted down the scattered enemy vessels. Most surrendered immediately. Some tried to fight and were destroyed. A few, including Thexnor's flagship, tried to run but were caught within days. The Velkari counselor was captured attempting to flee to a neutral system. His ship disabled by a human cruiser that had been tracking him for 2 days straight. Chen stood in the brig of the Indomitable, looking at the being who had caused so much death and suffering. Thexnor looked small now, his arrogance gone, replaced by fear and confusion. How? The Velkari asked. How did a species barely out of their caves defeat the Council? We've ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. We have technology you shouldn't even understand. How did you beat us? Chen regarded him coldly. Because you made the same mistake empires always make. You assumed that because you were old, you were superior. You assumed that because you'd been in space longer, you knew more. But you forgot one thing. Humanity didn't evolve in your safe, peaceful galaxy. We evolved on a death world where everything tried to kill us. We learned to adapt or die. We learned to innovate or perish. We learned that survival goes to the clever and the determined, not to the old and complacent. He leaned closer to the cage. You had 1,000 years to prepare. We had 47, and we still beat you. Because while you were sitting in your comfortable council chambers looking down on us, we were working, learning, building, preparing for the day when your patience with us ran out. You gave us every reason to expect you'd eventually try to destroy us, and then you acted surprised when we were ready for it. What will you do with me? Thexnor asked. That's not my decision. You'll stand trial for war crimes, for conspiring in the deaths of 340,000 civilians at Nu,